we're just doing splendidly. It's snowing here in West Virginia. What's it doing there?
Raining, obviously. I'm in England. Yeah, I've got very, very wet today on the way to work and the way back from work, but I'm working, so that's good. So I'm not going to complain.
That's right. You can't complain about the weather if you actually have work, right?
These are lucky balls as well, so, you know, it's only the journey.
That's wonderful.
How are you, Nina? You well?
I'm doing well, and I'm really excited about today's class. We have our studio here as well as some visitors, and so let me just check on the time. Yeah, I guess we can officially start. So I would just like to say that this is extra special because for the WVU flute students whose grandfather flutist is Peter Lloyd, we have a continued lineage of London Symphony principal flute here with Gareth today, and it's just such an honor to have you join us. We're such a lucky studio, and thank you, Haynes, for promoting this event and making it possible for us and everyone else who's joined. And welcome everyone who's here visiting our studio and our Zoom rooms. And we are going to be putting up the schedule probably tomorrow for the entire semester. So check Facebook out and you'll see all that's going on and all of our guest artists. And I think I'm just gonna hand it over to you, Gareth.
Cool. Hey Gareth, can I hop in here before you start?
Hi, Kevin. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, Gareth. I don't want to interrupt, but really quickly. Hi, everyone. My name is Corinne Smith. I am the interim sales manager at the William S. Haynes Flute Company. Gareth McLernan over, I guess, in Dublin right now, is my colleague at the company as well. We just want to thank Nina, obviously, for hosting this event, and thank all of you for being here, and thank Gareth for giving what will be, I know, an amazing class. So I've watched him do this several times, and I learn something new every time, and he's just so fun. He's just such a great person to be around and to and to listen to and learn from. So I hope you enjoy. If you're interested in any trials, obviously you have the tons of Haynes dealers around the country that are fantastic, but feel free to reach out to me or Gareth. We'll leave our information in the chat. If you have any questions about Haynes flutes, want to try them during this really sad pandemic of a time, but we do still just send out trials. We're happy to accommodate. So yeah, enjoy the class. And just before we let Gareth Davis take it over, I want to make sure we do a photo if we can. So for our social media purposes. So if you will turn on your cameras, if you don't want to be a part of the photo, that's fine, keep your camera off, but please turn on so we can see your smiling faces, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and we'll get this, you'll see your face on there later today.
And if you do have, if you've got a flute handy, then like grab your flute. You know, it's nice. If you got I mean, only if don't like put it together, but if it's handy, then you know, grab your flute and smile. Quick, I'll give you 5. Oh no, I'll give you 5, 4. No, and don't put it together. There isn't the time. Ready? There we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Beautiful. That will be on Instagram and Facebook stories imminently. I have to go because I've got to introduce Nestor Torres' class somewhere else. I can't remember where it was, but enjoy, have a lovely time. It was lovely to meet you, Nina, and yeah, have a wonderful session.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you very much, Gareth.
Thanks. Bye.
I mean, it's quite good that Gareth's going because it's very confusing having that many Gareths in the room. It doesn't happen.
Say, what's with this Gareth thing?
No. Yeah, well, we used to do concerts for kids, the two of us together, a very long time ago, and just played on that because it's not actually that common a name in Britain, but you know, it is in Wales. But I don't live in Wales. So anyway, look.
Did you have a duo name like the Gareths or something interesting?
We should do something like that, but maybe after the pandemic, when work's really short. Nina, thank you for inviting me, and thank you to Haynes again for sponsoring this. It's really nice to be able to see people, even if you're a long way away in the snow, with masks on as well. But you know, that's the way life is at the moment. But I wanted to talk to you really about my life in the orchestra. That sounds terribly grand, and I think it said somewhere on a brochure this was a lecture. I mean, I do talk a lot, but it's no lecture. But as Nina said, the great Peter Lloyd was a big hero of mine, and I have followed in his footsteps as being principal flute of the LSO. In fact, I've been principal flute of the LSO just even longer than Peter was, amazingly. I don't quite know how that happened because I'm only 22. You know, when you see people like me and you say, Gareth Davies, he used to be, you know, it's like Peter Lloyd and he's in the London Symphony Orchestra. He must be really amazing. And, you know, I do my best, but it's very easy, particularly when you're a student, to get discouraged. And I know at the moment, particularly the pandemic, I mean, you know, I see some of the things that that you do on Nina's Facebook page, and, you know, you're certainly keeping busy, that's for sure. But, you know, when you go out into the big wide world and you don't have somebody telling you what to do, it can be quite scary, and it's a big place. So I thought I would tell you how I got to where I was, because I have to tell you, it's a pretty sorry story. It's not, you know, I'd love to tell you, yes, I left college and I immediately became principal of the London Symphony Orchestra, but that simply didn't happen. So this is a tale of encouragement for you to begin with. So I took up the flute. I actually wanted to play the trumpet, but my mum said it was too loud. Now my son is a professional trumpet player, and she was right. It's really loud, but, you know, the flute's pretty loud too. I saw an Irish guy with a gold flute. I can't remember his name. Oh yeah, James Galway. I saw him on TV when I was a kid. Now, because I'm older than you, this was back in the 80s, and he was in the charts. It seems ridiculous now to have anybody who plays the flute in the charts apart from Lizzo, but that doesn't really count. He was playing Annie's song on Top of the Pops, which was the big program. And he was on this program, and they said they were trying to get people to play the flute. Because if you can believe it, back then, lots of people, particularly boys, weren't playing it. And he said, well, they said, why would you advise people to play the flute? And he said, well, it's not very difficult. I thought, that's the one for me. I actually met him a few years ago, and I told him this story. I said, you said that playing the flute was easy. And he said, but Gareth, I didn't say it was easy to play well. So there you go. Anyway, I took up the flute. I was 10, 11, not really early starter. I don't come from a musical family. Well, I do now. I've invented one. My kids are musicians. And my brother is a professional guitarist as well. But I played the flute. I went to a normal school, just a state school here in England. And I had music lessons at school. I played rugby. That's like American football, but with less adverts. And you throw it backwards as well. But the ball is the same shape. I went swimming. I did cycling. I did all the normal things that kids do. And the flute was kind of like one of the things I did. I didn't take it very seriously. Certainly didn't think you could do it for a job. That's for sure. And one day in a particularly awkward pass in rugby, everybody fell on my arm and broke my left arm at the elbow really badly. And I had to have it in a collar and cuff. So that means it's held up here for 6 months. Now, I couldn't cycle, I couldn't swim, I couldn't play rugby, but amazingly, it was almost the right place for playing the flute. It sounds like a really cheesy story, but it's true. It was the only one of my hobbies I could do. So I carried on doing it a bit more competitively. Now, I tried to get into my local youth orchestra, but I wasn't good enough. It didn't help that the principal flute at the time was somebody who you've probably heard of called Emily Bynon, who's principal flute in the Concertgebouw in Amsterdam. She was a couple of years above me, and so it was quite difficult to get in, but I did eventually get in and play second flute to Emily. That's my claim to fame. I was very lucky, and I got a scholarship when I was 16 to go to the junior department of the Guildhall. The Guildhall School of Music and Drama is based in the Barbican in London, where I work now. And it's I got a scholarship from the county, so my parents didn't have to pay, which was a really big thing because we couldn't afford to go somewhere like that. And it was great. It really changed my life because I suddenly saw all these other people, all the other freaks that like doing music were there on a Saturday, and I got to play music, and it was great fun. So I thought, somebody said to me, are you going to go to music college? I didn't really have a plan. I certainly didn't have a plan B. I didn't really have a plan A. So I thought, yeah, okay, I'll go to music college and I'll be a flute player. That's what I'll do, definitely. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know who Peter Lloyd was, that's for sure, at that point in time. And so I auditioned to the 4 major music colleges in London: the Royal Academy, the Royal College, the Guildhall, and Trinity. And I turned up at my first audition at Trinity woefully unprepared because I didn't really know what to do. And they said, "Are you sure you want to do this for a job? You may have to study for 25 years." Which is weird. I mean, it's lifelong, really. But anyway, I didn't get a place there. So I went the next day to the Royal Academy of Music, and William Bennett was on the panel. And he said to me, "Gareth Davies, are you related to Gareth Morris?" No, I'm not related to somebody with a different name, but another Gareth that plays the flute. And I was so freaked out that Wib, who was famous, was sitting on the panel listening to me. The first piece you have to play is 4A Fantasy. You still do at the Royal Academy. And we have the piano introduction, tung ching, tung ching. And then instead of 1B, I played about 5 different versions in different octaves. And they all started writing. And I thought, I didn't get a place there. So then I went to the Royal College of Music, and I thought I did a really good audition. It was actually quite good. And then I had to go and write an essay, and I had to choose 3 essays. And one of them at the time was, could you compare the musical journey that Brahms takes through his 4 symphonies? And I wasn't really sure who Brahms was, and I'd never listened to a symphony of his, that's for sure. So I think I just, excuse my French, but just bullshitted my way through it. I dread to read that paper now. I didn't get a place at the Royal College of Music. So my last choice was at the Guildhall, and I went and I did the audition, and it went really well, and I didn't get a place at the Guildhall either. And I was sort of slightly stuck because I had no other ideas what to do. A week later, I got a letter saying I'd been offered a reserve place. Now, obviously, there's only so many flute players. It doesn't seem like it sometimes, certainly not at conventions, but there's only a few flute players, and all the good ones get places at all the colleges. And of course, they can only take 1. So a reserve place is one of those ones if somebody turns a place down. And somebody, I don't know who it was, I'd like to thank them, they didn't want the place at the Guildhall. So I got in as like the spare flute player on a reserve place. And that was the beginning of my illustrious career. It got better after that. We had to do technical exams every year. Now I've never been very good at memorizing music, and because I now play in the orchestra, I haven't really had to. I'm still terrible at it. It's not something I'm proud of. I should work at it, but we work 7 days a week. Well, normally we do. I could play all the scales. You had to play scales in, you know, all the keys, melodic, harmonic, thirds, fifths, fourths, all that kind of stuff. And it was very traditional. And you had to play them. I could play them, but you had to play them from memory without the book. And I always used to get lost. I'd sort of start doing C sharp melodic minor in thirds, and I'd finish in D major in fourths. And I don't really know how I modulated. It was embarrassing. Anyway, in that mid-year exam, you had to play scales and orchestral excerpts, and I failed that exam. The next year we had another exam, and I had to pass that one. It was the technical exam, and it was even more technical, if that could be possible. And I failed that one too. And my teacher was Edward Beckett, he is the grandson of Samuel Beckett, the playwright. He's a huge man and used to scare the living daylights out of me. I didn't like him at the time, but I'm very grateful to the way he whipped me into shape with my appalling technique. And after my exam, I had to retake it, and the fire alarm went off in the middle. and I had to go outside and then come back in, and they remembered that we were doing C sharp melodic minor in fourths. I don't know how they remember that. So I played it. I played the excerpts. I came out, sat in the lobby, and Ed Beckett walked past, and he came towards me, and he just looked at me. I won't tell you word for word what he said because it was very rude, but he said, "What were you doing in there, Gareth?" I said, I did my best. He said, "Well, the excerpts were fine, but you played your scales like an idiot." That's not what he said, but let's just say that's what he said. I said, am I going to have to retake it? He said, "Do you think I want to listen to that shit again?" So there we go. They gave me a minimal pass. I tell you this, not because I'm proud of it. And I also worked very hard. I just was so far behind everybody else at the beginning of my journey. It was only 3 years at college. I was so far behind, I was constantly playing catch up. So anyway, when I was at college, I only played in the symphony orchestra once, and that was piccolo in the Turangalila Symphony. And in the great way that music colleges do, they try and prepare you for the profession. It took 28 years before Turangalila Symphony came up in my professional career, and I wasn't playing the piccolo. But there you go. Let's just say I was a late developer, shall we, and leave it at that. So anyway, I left college and I did what lots of people do. I didn't really have a plan. I decided to apply for jobs, and amazingly, I got the first job I applied for, which was selling tennis rackets in a sports shop in Guildford High Street. I don't even play tennis, but I was very good at it. I also taught flute in a school, very expensive private school, and I also did a course, and I ended up teaching GCSE and A-level music. So that's like high school music stuff, because I'd done a degree in music rather than the performers course at the time. So that was quite good. And I just did that because I had to earn some money until professional jobs came up. Now, the very first professional audition I did was for the Royal Opera House for the piccolo job. I used to love playing piccolo. And at the time, Bernard Haitink was the music director at the Royal Opera House. Now, if you've ever seen the Royal Opera House in London, it looks just like an opera house you think it should look like. You know, it's like a wedding cake. It's lovely. You go in the stage door, it's like a maze. You have to have somebody to show you where you're going because it's a rabbit warren. And I was warming up in this room full of piccolo players, which was hideous. And I was then, my name was called. I had to walk up the stairs, you know, and whenever you do an audition, you have to walk up loads of stairs, so you're really out of breath by the time you get to the top. I got to the top of the stairs and was told to wait by the door, and they'd call me in. And on the door, it said Bernard Haitink. And it absolutely freaked me out again. It was just like Wibb at my Royal Academy audition. Suddenly, there's Bernard Haitink is going to be listening to me playing opera piccolo excerpts. And I went to pieces. And I walked in and played like an idiot because I was so freaked out. And of course, funnily enough, Bernard Haitink didn't sit on the panel for the piccolo auditions. I don't know why I thought he would do, but there we are. Didn't get that job. Anyway, I did various bits of freelance work. I eventually wrote to everybody. I did a couple of gigs, one of which was with the London Symphony Orchestra, playing Mahler 2, because the second flute player had broken his ankle, which is amazing. It was nothing to do with me, honest. They had literally, he'd broken his ankle in the afternoon and they had a concert that evening. And they said they tried everybody and nobody was free. And I just happened to have my CV in the right place at the right time. And I had to sit and sight read the second flute part to Mahler 2. I'd never even listened to the end. So when the choir started singing at the end, I was nearly jumped out of my seat. I'd forgotten they were sat behind me. But I thought, yeah, I like this orchestra. I really like this orchestra. So I was never going to get a job in the London Symphony Orchestra straight away. So a job came up in the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra. Now, for those of you who don't know where Bournemouth is, I'm not surprised. It's on the south coast of England. We did a big tour in America about 25 years ago. It's a very well-respected regional orchestra in Britain. I applied for the job and my CV, which was quite short, was sent back saying, thank you very much, but you don't have enough experience to apply for this job, which was quite depressing because not having enough experience to even apply for a job is pretty sad. But that's one of those things you'll come up against. But, you know, I'm going to talk to you a bit about that in a minute. They auditioned loads of people and they had lots of people on trial. Because in this country, you do an audition, then you get offered a trial period with an orchestra. So you'll go in and play for a couple of weeks, something like that, or maybe one day if you're really bad. They tried loads of people and they didn't find anybody. So they went back to their files, which was probably marked no hopers. And I was in that file with a load of other ex-students. And we all turned up on a Monday morning and a Monday afternoon in Bournemouth to do an audition. Now, I did an audition that day, which was no better or no worse than any other audition I'd done. I've skipped a few jobs, which I also didn't get, by the way. I didn't do a particularly brilliant audition, I don't think. It went well, I was quite happy with it, did all the right things. Anyway, when I got home, there was a message on my answer phone, which is what we used to use in the 20th century instead of mobiles. And they left a message for me and said, we'd like to offer you a trial. Well, I was totally gobsmacked. And I suddenly realized that I'd only actually played principal flute about 7 times in my entire life. In my youth orchestra, once Emily had left, and then once at college, and then a couple of little freelance dates for local choral societies. And I think that's something that people don't always realize when you go out into the big wide world, that, you know, you might not have lots of experience. So it's really important that you pay attention and absorb everything as fast as you can when you do get to go there. Now, I can remember the first concert I did with Yakov Kreutzberg, the late Yakov Kreutzberg, with the Bournemouth. We played Nielsen Masquerade Overture, the Brahms Violin Concerto, and Bartók's Concerto for Orchestra. Now, I know this is hard for you to believe, but there was no internet back then, and there was no Spotify. So I didn't know the Bartók Concerto for Orchestra, and there were no excerpt books either. Trevor White hadn't thought up that idea. So I had to go to a record shop and buy a CD. You've probably heard of those. And I had to buy a CD of the Bartók Concerto for Orchestra. And I then, you couldn't just go to IMSLP and download the flute part. You couldn't phone up the library, because I was practicing like 3 months in advance of my trial, because I really wanted to get it right. So I bought a copy of the score and I wrote out the first flute part in pencil in my lunch hour whilst being Guildford's premier tennis racket seller. So when a student comes to me and says, I'm really sorry I couldn't find the cadenza for Petrushka, I don't have very much sympathy, because A, that's not true, and B, try harder. Because there's a lot of people, even on the Zoom window, that will want to maybe play in an orchestra, and not everybody does. There's lots of things you can do. But, anyway, to cut a very long story short, I did 3 weeks work, and then they offered me the job. I was gobsmacked. Sorry, in American, that means I was really surprised. I was amazed. I couldn't believe it. And I was 22. And everybody in the orchestra was about twice my age. I think it was the perfect job to start with, because we used to do a concert in Poole or Bournemouth, where the orchestra was based. Then we do the same concert in 2 other venues around the southwest of England on the following 2 days. So every time you did a piece, you played it 3 times in concert, which is a really great way of learning the orchestral repertoire. I wouldn't like to hear some of the recordings I played back then, because I can tell you that they probably were terrible. But I learned, and I was very, very, very annoying, because I was so excited. The second flute called me her little puppy, because I was just like, every week, everybody in the orchestra would be like, oh no, it's Brahms 1 again. And I'd be like, yeah, Brahms 1, I've never played it before. Oh, I was that guy. Don't do that. But it was great. I really did it. I was there for 2 years. We had our 2 boys down there. It was a really happy time for us as a family and professionally. I loved it. But then this job advert came up for the London Symphony Orchestra and the BBC Symphony Orchestra as well. The BBC is the orchestra that does the last night of the proms. If you've seen them do that, it's the state orchestra in this country. But the LSO was the one I wanted to play. When I was a kid, I grew up, the first time I heard the LSO was in the Odeon Cinema when I went to see Star Wars when I was 7. And it was that sound was the thing I just thought, that's what I want to be part of. Anyway, it was my dream job. And I actually had experience, so I applied and they didn't tell me to go away. And I did an audition, I did a trial, and I can remember on my trial, which took 2 years, the last concert I had was Forêt Pélias et Mélisande, the Ravel Piano Concerto, and complete Daphnis and Chloe. And I thought, well, if you muck this one up, you ain't going to get this job. It was the thing. And my teacher was in the same section, in the same section playing alto flute, so it was even more terrifying. I got a phone call from the chairman of the orchestra about 3 months after that concert, asking me if I would like to accept the position of London Symphony Orchestra principal flute. He said, but I expect you'll want to think about it. I was thinking, no, I don't want to think about it. I know the answer. He said, do you have any questions? I said, yes, I do. Now, this was back in 2000. And it had just been announced that there were going to be 3 new Star Wars films. The last Star Wars films, or so we thought until Disney got involved, and now they're going to go on forever. But we thought it was the last 3 Star Wars films, and they'd announced that the LSO was going to be recording the soundtracks with John Williams. So like 7-year-old me was screaming inside. And he said, do you have any questions? I said, yes, I do. This is true. Do I get to be in Star Wars? He said, yes, you do. I said, fine, I'll take it. And apparently he relayed this message to the woodwind section. He was just like, sounds like an idiot. There we are. I'm sure they don't regret it. Now, that was 20 years ago, and I've been sat in that chair ever since. I love it. It's great. It's really difficult at the moment because of the pandemic, and we are self-employed. So if we don't work, we don't get paid. So I haven't really earned any money over the last year, which is tough. But we've got little bits and pieces coming back in now, and it's been great. If you want to, not now, maybe when I've finished speaking, but you can go onto YouTube and find the London Symphony Orchestra channel. We've got, I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of videos of stuff that we've done over the years. You can see me with a variety of haircuts. And then you can spot the ones which we've done recently, because we're all sat 2 meters apart with screens and all the strings have masks on. So they're the ones during the pandemic. That's a challenge. But now, the thing is, I had to sit down and work this out, but I've sat on a lot of audition panels. So for the orchestra, but also for music colleges, scholarship panels, hundreds of them. I worked out in the LSO alone, in fact, I've sat on the panel for 3 different flute positions, 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons, 4 oboes, the leader, and a viola audition. I don't know why I went to the viola auditions, but there we go. They were definitely the worst. Now, what's interesting is people always ask me about auditions. Now, I know that lots of you will be thinking, well, this doesn't apply to me because I don't want to go and play in an orchestra, or I don't want to do anything to do with orchestras or something like that. But actually, a lot of the things that I've picked out and have realized about auditions apply to all sorts of things, even if it's a job interview, or it might be an audition if you're wanting to do some postgraduate thing, or sometimes just the way you come across to people. So I've got my top tips for auditions. I don't want to say top tips for life, because that sounds pretentious. But the thing is, the first thing you should do, if there is a job that you want to apply for, you should apply for it. You will never, ever, ever feel ready. There will never be a point in your career where you think, yep, I'm ready. I mean, if the Berlin Phil job came up tomorrow, I would think, ooh, maybe I might need to do a bit more practice. I'm never going to be more ready than now, but you will always feel like that. Apply for it. You really do have nothing to lose. But when you do apply, please make sure that you apply for the right job. I've literally had letters applying for a job in a different orchestra sent to me, to a different flute player. I mean, if you wrote to the Berlin Philharmonic, dear Gareth, I don't think that would go down terribly well, to be honest. You should know who these people are. So make sure you send your application form into the right person. It's one of those things. Send in what they ask for. We get a lot of people that have really, really amazingly glossy brochures that they send in with CDs, sometimes chocolate. I don't mind the chocolate personally, but I'm not going to listen to the CD, because the last flute job we had in the LSO, we had 300 applications. And that first sift through of all the CVs and stuff like that is just to see who you are, what you studied, where you studied, what you've been doing, what kind of person you are. That's all we can figure out from a thing. We actually send a form out so that we can just find out very quickly what we actually want to know. So if they ask you to fill in the form. If they ask you to send in your glossy brochure, then go for it, get it laminated for all I care. But when you get your CV or your biography, keep it relevant. Okay, if you are applying, let's say, we have 2 vacancies in the LSO at the moment. We're not advertising them for obvious reasons, but there'll be a second flute job and a principal flute job, because we have 2 principals, which will be coming up in the next year. It's irrelevant that you used to work in Mr. Magoo's pie shop at the weekends when you were 15, for example, to the LSO. It's amazing how many people put things like that. I worked part-time in a bulb factory. That was one of my favourites. You have to look at what you're applying for, okay? When you just come out of college, or when you're still at college, your CV isn't going to be very long. That's okay. I would expect that. I have to say my experience of when I was younger is quite different now. I look at people and think, well, okay, they're interesting. So, you know, if you haven't got millions of freelance dates, that's okay. If you haven't got millions of concertos, that's fine. But, you know, if you won like the Copper Canyon Concerto competition when you were 13, again, it's kind of irrelevant. Although I'm sure your Chaminade was lovely. Basically, read the application and follow the simple instructions. That sounds really silly, but it's amazing how many times it happens. Also, now most things are on email. Please don't send your entire file of HD photographs that you did in a photo shoot, because it will slow the email system, which is powered by coal at the London Symphony Orchestra, and it will basically grind to a halt. Also, we have had people send in the wrong photograph. I'll just leave that there and just say, yeah, that's right, Ethan. They were really, really quite, yeah, I won't go there. We didn't look at them, but people have sent in photographs they really have asked us to delete the next day, and the orchestral manager has done that, but it doesn't create a good impression. Okay, let's just leave that one. Now, the other thing is, please be polite. I'm one of those people, I don't like, I mean, I'm very British. You know, if you go to a restaurant, there's a waiter, and you'll sit there and you'll eat, there you go, hello, yes, very nice, thank you, yes, very nice. And then you start eating your food and it's awful, and they come over and say, you enjoying your food? I always go, oh yes, it's lovely, thank you so much, because I'm British. But I'm always polite to waiters, I'm always polite to most people, because, you know, life's short, you should just be polite. When you come to the LSO, the number of people, you've got these really, really massive heavy doors that you kind of have to lean against to open. And when you're carrying your flute and your music and a bottle of water and your lucky teddy bear, and you kind of shove it, there's a really nice young lady who stands and holds the door open for you. In fact, she often opens the door when you first come in the building. And the number of people that don't say thank you and just brush past her, and some people are rude as well, and they're just not very nice. And what they don't realise is that she's actually the orchestral manager of the London Symphony Orchestra. She looks about 15, but you wouldn't want to cross her. And it's amazing how many people don't treat her with respect because of that. And I think that tells a lot about a person, because you must always remember that we're looking for a good colleague. Of course, we assume that your flute playing is above and beyond the standard that we need, but we also need you to be a good colleague. Sharon Williams, our piccolo player, and I joined the orchestra within 6 months of each other, and we've been sat next to each other for 20 years. And we spend a lot of time together on tour and around the place. If we didn't get on, if she wasn't a nice person, obviously I am, but if she was not a nice person, it would be really difficult. So it's actually really important. Just remember, if you play in an orchestra, it's a team sport, not a blood sport, okay? Now, bring your own piano part. Please bring your own piano part. The number of people that don't, they'll assume, yeah, I know it's probably Mozart or something like that, but you can't expect the pianist, if you were auditioning in London, you probably wouldn't bring a pianist all the way from West Virginia, I'm going to imagine. That would be very expensive, and you'd be sadly disappointed by the pay you get in the LSO. But if you use the orchestral pianist, bring your own part. And also think very carefully about what you play, because you're not going to have very much time to rehearse. You'll have 10 minutes at the most. So, you know, if you must play Chant de Linos in your orchestral audition, and I'd advise you not to, bring your own part, bring your own pianist, I would say, and rehearse it, because you can't expect that. You'll just spend so long trying to get it together. It's going to be difficult. Be polite and respectful to the piano player, because we will ask their opinion as well, because we want to know what you're like to work with. We don't want to hear that you're difficult, uncommunicative, or just rude, because I don't want you in the orchestra. So when choose your repertoire really carefully. If you look at what you're applying to join, if you want to join the LSO, you're going to have a huge variety of repertoire, because it's the repertoire that we get through in a week. We often do 3 different programs in a week, and we only rehearse them that week, and then we're on to another 3 the next week. It's unbelievable, the speed. And it can go from Bach right up to pieces that were literally written the week before, for all sorts of genres and stuff. It's really, really exciting. It's great. But you might want to think about what your playing in your audition for that. Similarly, if you go to another orchestra, you know, something like the New York Philharmonic, with their repertoire is quite sort of 19th century based, and then a lot of Mahler and stuff like that. You know, it probably wouldn't really be good to go and play some Josquin des Prez or something really contemporary either. If you're going to apply for the Ensemble Art Contemporain in Paris, who specialise in music where the ink is still wet, then again, don't play Chaminade Concertino. Please don't play that. Okay, maybe some Boulez will go down well, but even that's hardly modern, is it, anymore? It's not a trick. There's no right and wrong. There's no like, I can't tell you what's the piece you should play. For example, I played Dutius on the team for the LSO audition. Worked for me, but you know, that's not what you should. I can't tell you that's the piece you should play, but it's not a trick. We're just wanting to hear you play. We want to see what you can do. And I want to hear that you're aware of the stylistic thing. But just remember, although the press regularly says that all orchestras sound the same now because we've all heard each other on the internet, it's just not true. All the orchestras in London don't sound the same. It's unbelievable how different they sound. If I go and play in the London Philharmonic Orchestra, I usually stick out like a sore thumb for at least 5 minutes until I remember that I'm not in the LSO. It's really, really big contrast between the different orchestras, and that just gets bigger when you cross countries and when you cross continents. Now, this is a tricky one. Confidence, not arrogance. It's a really fine line. Recently I've had a lot of new young players coming in because we have a vacancy. We've had a pandemic on, and it's been quite nice to get lots of young players who've got very little experience in, just to give them a bit of a go, to see what it's like and see, you know, it's kind of like sink or swim, come in and have a go. And some of them are really cool and just like sit there and very professional. Other people flap and they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. And then other people come in and they're kind of like, yeah, this is fine, and then play it really badly. It's a really fine line, because I want confidence. I want somebody who's just going to get on, do the job and not flap. Because if somebody is sat next to me, flapping around, panicking, asking me questions all the time, it's going to freak me out, and then I'll probably play like an idiot as well. But equally, if somebody is super arrogant and won't listen because they think they know how it goes. I mean, I do remember having to ask a player to play without vibrato once, and it looked like I just asked them to kill their mother or something. And I said, can you not play with any vibrato? Well, I'm being expressive. I said, well, can you not? Because, you know, although you play the flute, you don't have to play with vibrato all the time, and certainly not in the orchestra when you haven't got the tune and the first flute isn't, I would say, and they wouldn't do it. So it's difficult. But when you go for an audition, look confident, look people in the eye, smile. That's it. Just be normal. You don't need to do anything, but just be careful. I speak from experience. Back to my audition for the BBC Symphony Orchestra and the London Symphony Orchestra. 2 days earlier, I got back from a tour of the United States of America, where we played the Prelude de l'après-midi 25 times. We did 25 concerts, obviously. The first time I ever played that piece was in Carnegie Hall. And I was so young, I didn't realize how terrifying that was. It was a very nice hall. And then we went to Wilmington and went to all these places all over the place. I can't even remember where we went now. But by the time I got to the audition for the BBC Symphony Orchestra, the very first excerpt I had to play was the opening 4 bars of the Prelude de l'après-midi. And I just kind of was like, just played this 25 times around the States, guys. This is in my head. I didn't say that out loud. I can do this. This is easy. I can do this in one breath. No problem at all. And I started to play, and I was sort of looking at them and playing it from memory at the same time. And then I thought, oh, hang on. I'm not going to make this. No, I always do this in one breath. And I got halfway through, and then I reached that point where if I was going to take a breath, I should have taken a breath. Didn't take a breath, carried on, and then ran out of breath before the last 2 notes, and then had to take a massive breath just before it. And I was like, yeah, slight case of overconfidence there. So the next day I went to the thing, I was a little more humble. about it. So, you know, it's a bit like being a bouncer, a doorman in a nightclub. It kind of gets you through the door, and that's when the real fun begins. Certainly in this country, in Britain, where you get to actually play in the orchestra, which is just the best. I mean, it's an amazing feeling, especially being in the LSO. It was like being given the keys to a Ferrari or something like that. Really great. But just remember, you know, if you do apply for jobs, you won't get them all. Nobody does. Nobody gets all the jobs. I mean, you know, I remember seeing Dennis, you know, Dennis Brickoff in LA. You know, he was a student. I used to coach him, which makes me feel really old, last century sometime. And he applied for several jobs over here and he didn't get them. And let's face it, it's not because he's not good, is it? You know, the boy can play the flute, but sometimes you don't fit in. Not everybody will like you. You're going to have to get used to this. And it's difficult because, you know, I expect all of you were probably like the best flute player in your small town. You were like the best. I was the best. Oh yeah, they're the best. And then you got in your local youth orchestra and you were like the best. And then you suddenly get to university and you're like, oh, there's a lot of really good players here. Yeah, it just gets worse. You know, suddenly there's other people that you've heard of who are like auditioning against you. Not everybody will like you. That's okay. Not everybody likes me. I'm old enough to not care anymore. But you can't please everybody. So, you know, I know when you grow up, everybody tells you you're amazing. Then the older you get, the fewer people tell you you're amazing. And that if you work hard enough, you can achieve all your dreams. Well, maybe. But, you know, sometimes dreams, you have to compromise, or sometimes they lead you in places which are totally unexpected and actually much better and much more fulfilling. As I told you, I didn't sit as a kid in my house thinking, oh, I really want to be principal flute of the LSO. To say it just happened is also not true. It was a long journey and a lot of hard work, but it wasn't without its difficulties. So if you do an audition and you get a no in an audition, which you will, because it happens to everybody, it's not the end of the world, and it's not the end of your journey. Okay. Now, I'm going to have a sip of my tea. It's cold. Yep. Now, let's talk about excerpts. I hate excerpts. I really hate them. I wish they didn't have to happen. I understand what they do, but I have to tell you, there are still moments now in my career. So I've been, 25 years principal flute in 2 different orchestras. And still now a piece will come up that I've never played before. And I think, oh, I don't know this piece. Happens quite a lot. I'll get the flute part out, I'll flick through it, I think, yeah, that looks all right, that looks all right. Oh my God, it's an excerpt, and it's some dim and distant memory and trauma from when I was at college of an excerpt that I had to learn, completely out of context, didn't know anything about it, and I'm like, oh, now it should mean that one page is like, good, well, I know that bit, but no, that bit is suddenly this massive psychological battle, because that's the bit I failed my flipping mid-year on. And I've got to play it now. I mean, the LSO, I'm supposed to be able to do this stuff. That's why I hate excerpts. But why do we ask for them at auditions? They're not to catch you out. If I was to hear you playing an audition for an orchestra job, if I gave you Leonora 3, you know that one? Starts with a high note on the G. It's got the triplety bit. It's got the fast bit with a bassoon. I can hear everything I need to know about your flute playing in that one excerpt. I always ask for 3 excerpts because you've come a long way, but I can hear it straight away whether you've got, I want to hear all the things that you can do. I can hear your sound. I can hear whether you've got an internal pulse, because you'll need it, because you don't get that from the conductor. I will hear the way you keep a steady pulse, the way you have, if you've got intonation, good intonation that is. I'll hear your articulation. I'll hear the way you are aware of the stylistic things about how to play in an orchestra. Now, they're not orchestral excerpts to see how fast you can play. I don't want to hear how fast you can play Mendelssohn's Midsummer Night's Dream, because it never, ever goes that fast, ever. It always slows down. I play the clarinet. I don't want to see how slowly you can play the Debussy Prelude de l'après-midi en faune before you die of oxygen deprivation. I don't care if you play it in one breath. If you do, great. If you don't, I don't care. Is it musical? That's what I want to hear. are you aware of how it should sound? Can you do something special that's going to make people in the audience go, oh? I want to hear, I use them to hear technical issues. So I want to hear your articulation, your tone, your flexibility, and your musicianship. And also, can I hear the different styles? Does your Brahms sound like your Bartok? I hope not. Does your Beethoven have the same vibrato as your Chaminade? I hope not. I mean, we were working today with Sir John Eliot Gardner, who doesn't let me use any vibrato at all. And it's really hard. It's really hard because you get so used to blending in like smudging a charcoal thing. And I found so many flute players are unable to actually change their vibrato or stop it. The number of people I say, can you play that without vibrato? And they go, yeah, sure. And they carry on playing with vibrato. It's very difficult because you actually have to know where you're supposed to be phrasing. And that's, to do the breath control and stuff. It's really difficult. But are you aware of the stylistic differences between the composers? Because, that's important. Are you aware of who you might be playing with in these orchestral excerpts so that you can adjust your sound accordingly? Because I know we spend hours trying to sound brilliant flute players, but sometimes you've got to sound really hideous to blend with the oboe. That's no reflection on oboes. But, sometimes I've been asked, can you sound more peasant-like? No, that sounds too pretty. Can you not do that? And it goes against everything that you sometimes think, but there's that flexibility that you need to know. I have to tell you, the very first day when I joined the London Symphony Orchestra, the chairman welcomed me, and everyone was, oh, nice to see you, yes. And it was with Lauren Marzell, and we were playing his then new cantata, which I'm sure you've heard of, called The Empty Pot. No, not heard of it? No. Anyway, it's based on a Japanese story, and the opening 8 bars has a narrator and a flute solo, and in the flute part it says try and sound like a shakuhachi. So I thought, right, I'm going to do this. So the very first day, so I welcome Gareth Davies, our new principal flute narrator, and you could see the whole viola section turn around and go, why have they given him the job? It was quite embarrassing, but that's what you have to do sometimes. You have to put your ego aside. So what I want to hear is if I set you Mendelssohn's Midsummer Night's Dream again. You can play it fast. Of course you can. Everybody can play it fast. It's easy. I would expect you to be able to play it fast, but it never goes that speed. Even if the piece starts that speed, it never finishes it. That's good. But if I want to hear what you can do, I'll say, that's great. Can you do it this speed now, please? And then what will happen is I'll give you that exact speed that's just a bit too fast to single tongue, but a bit too slow to double tongue, because that's the speed that it always goes. So annoying. I want to see if you can do that. And you stick with it. Have you got a pulse? Daphnis. Anybody can play that. Anybody can play it and sound musical. Okay. And anybody can play it really robotically, to play it absolutely in tempo with a metronome. But can you play it with a steady pulse and make it sound like there is none? Can you play it musically? Because you've got that bass section. I mean, they have to count to 4, which is difficult for them anyway. But then, if you start playing around with it all over the place like you do in your practice room, the orchestra will finish before you. I've heard it happen. It's really embarrassing. Now, this is something which I never thought about or realised until I was on the other side of the panel. But everybody in the orchestra, I'm sure you're the same, but when you listen to a piece of music in an orchestra, you'll often I often find myself, my ear being drawn to the sound of the flute, and I'll hear that, and my wife will say, oh, didn't you love that trumpet? I'm like, what trumpet? I was listening to the flute. All players kind of do that to some extent. It's difficult not to. It's actually really nice when you hear a piece you don't know, because you listen to it differently, I think. But when I've played a piece, I always hear the flute part. It's kind of annoying, but that's the same for everybody on the panel. Everybody on the panel of your audition knows the context of what you're playing as an excerpt from their viewpoint. Now, they can hear the whole orchestra, whether you hear it or not. That's why it's really important to study the works that you're playing, not just learn the excerpts, but listen to them. Don't just listen to the bit, listen to the whole piece. You've got time to do that. On a panel, you know, if you go and play at the NFA convention, right, there'll be a room full of flute players, at least half of whom are going, I could do that better. And then you go to the room where everybody's trying flutes and it's just full of flute players, and there's millions of flute players, and everybody plays flutes to other flutes, and everybody goes, they're great flute players, aren't they? Yes, they are. Who cares? On an audition panel, there may not even be a flute player. There may be 2 clarinet players, an oboe player, a violinist and a cellist, and they'll be deciding your fate. So when they hear you pulling an exa all over the place, they know how it's supposed to sound, because they might be the poor guys in the back going chung 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 chung, trying to catch where your ridiculous pulse has gone. Again, you know, I know that, for instance, when the clarinets play really loudly, it goes flat, and when they play really quietly, it goes sharp. And of course, I don't want to hear that when they do it in the audition, because our principals don't do that. But flute players, we all know when we go up at the top register and we get really loud, we go sharp. And when we do a lovely diminuendo in Leonora and go quiet in the top register, it goes flat. Same in the bottom register, you play quietly, it goes flat. We all know this, so let's not do it. Because other instrumentalists are less forgiving. Now, again, I have to tell you from experience, we were doing about 10 years ago, we did quite a lot of movie soundtracks in the LSO, which is always quite nice. We were working with Bernard Haitink again. He'd forgotten about my piccolo audition by this point. And we were doing Mahler 4 with him. It's got 4 flutes in it. And we were playing Mahler 4, and because he was really old, he still is really old, but he's even older now. He was like 80. So he would just do 1 3-hour rehearsal in the morning and then 1 3-hour rehearsal the next morning. So because we only earn money when we get paid, we only earn money when we play. That's what, oh dear. We'd rehearse with Bernard in the morning, and then in the afternoon we were going to Abbey Road Studios and we were recording the last 2 Harry Potter soundtracks. So it's kind of a weird day. Really long weeks of Mahler in the morning, Harry Potter in the afternoon. And there's this one section on the second page of the Mahler 4 part where it's supposed to sound like, I think it's Boy Scouts in the Austrian mountains. And the 4 flutes play in unison on an E, and it's all based around E's and C sharps. It goes bum, 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 dee da 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 da, dee da 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 da. Anyway, it goes bum, bum, bum on an E. And it's got a diminuendo. And what always happens, and is in fact what happened with us, it went bum, 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 ba ba da ba da, and the pitch went down. And Bernard stopped and he said, Gareth, it's getting a bit flat. I said, oh, sorry, Bernard. He said, I know it's really, really difficult. Everybody goes flat on this bit. It's really difficult. But if you could try and just keep the pitch up a little bit, but you know, I know it's difficult. I said, okay, Bernard, we'll see what we can do. And I said, come on, guys, keep the pitch up. I mean, don't get flat. And it was more in tune. But, you know, Bernard was like, I know it's hard. I've heard everybody struggles with it. You know, do your best. So then we go to Abbey Road Studios, and we were working with Alexander Desplat, who is a composer. He's written loads of films. He did The Shape of Water. We did that with him with 12 flutes, and it won an Oscar, obviously, with 12 flutes. He's a flute player himself. He studied at the Paris Conservatoire. He's a very good flute player, and he often records the flute parts in his own movies. And there was this really lovely flute solo. I hope this isn't a plot spoiler for anyone, but it's where Dobby dies. Is that okay? Yeah, no, I'm not upset anyone with that. And we'd been sat there, you know, all afternoon. It was about 8 o'clock at night. It was getting towards the end of a very long day, and there was this flute solo. It started quite low down, and it went all the way up, wheeled all the way up to a top C, and it basically started piano and got quieter as it went up. And I played it, and Alexander stopped and said, Gareth, you're flat. I said, oh, I know, but you know, it's because it goes up. It goes up high, and I'll diminish it. And he said, I know, it's hard. That's why you're playing it, and I'm not. Can you play it in tune? I was like, So I had Bernard Haitink letting me off in the morning, and Alexander Desplat was like, "No, I'm paying your money, and it's supposed to sound right." So it happens. It's quite scary. I think flexibility of sound, that is the number one thing for me in playing in an orchestra. That's what I want to hear in your audition. Don't shy away from ugly sounds. The sound and tone of your instrument and the sound you make on it is made of many, many different things. I saw this amazing documentary about Vermeer, the painter, a while ago. He's famous. I think he even had a type of blue named after him. But he has this amazing painting of fabrics that he does, and there's this blue, and it's so deep and lustrous and has so much life about it. And you think, my wife is a painter, but I can't do it at all. I think if it's blue, you buy blue paint, right? That's what you do. But no, the artists mix up all sorts of things. And they'd x-rayed his paintings, and they showed how he made this blue. And the first thing he did was put yellow on the canvas. And then he ended up putting green on, and I'll get the colours all wrong. But the point is, he put on lots of different colours, spat in the paints, put grit and stuff in it, put all sorts of things to make up this sound. But when you look at it, you just see this incredibly lustrous blue. And I think I've often thought that that's quite a lot of what we do as flute players, because, the sound we make can be very uninteresting, at its most basic. But don't be scared of bringing in all sorts of things, because in the orchestra you do. I'm sure you've all done it, but those times when the conductor stops and you don't notice quite quick enough and you're the only person that plays one note on your own. The number of times I've done that, and the sound that's come out, I've been like, oh my God, they're going to sack me. That sounds awful. But it's because the sheer effort that's in there, you as part of an orchestra, your individual sound becomes part of a greater sound. That's why it's so exciting. So sometimes, I think about that. I would say that what I would want you to really take away from having to do excerpts is that they are just excerpts, as they say. It's not the whole piece. I've done classes that have gone on for days about La Primidi, and we only talk about the opening. And how you should do this, about the breathing, about the tone, about where you should put stresses and things like that. And then you sit in an orchestra and you play it, and you first thing you discover is that it's also an excerpt for the oboes and the clarinets. Who knew? It's not just a flute solo, and those first 4 bars are just the first 4 bars. It's a whole piece. It's not everything. So ideally, when I'm listening to your excerpts in a panel, I want to hear that you know what's going on. You need to sound like you've played them 1,000 times before. But to do that, you need to listen to them. You need to listen to them a lot. Look at the score, see what else is going on. Because, for instance, at the beginning of Leonora, when you play that top G, some editions have a forte piano, some of them have a sforzando and stuff like that. And if you play it on your own, if it was the beginning of a flute sonata, you do it one way. But when you know that it's actually with the entire first violin section, you think how they sound. And I don't think Beethoven wrote it so you could hear a flute player tonguing the end of it with the violins going, Fwa. That's the sound they make. Think of the sound they make. Let that inform your way of playing. Okay? But of course, there's more than one way of playing every piece. So if I tell you, I think it should go like this, I may be completely wrong. That's the best thing about music. Now, a student asked me a few years ago, did you always just want to play in an orchestra? Which made me laugh, because I thought, well, what does that mean? Now, I know some of you will be sitting there thinking, well, I don't really want to play in an orchestra. But actually, what's amazing about it is it's so much more than just playing in an orchestra. Apart from, it's been nice. My boys were the same age when I did the Star Wars movies with the LSO as I was when the first ones came out. And, my son, who's called Luke, I hate to tell you, Gareth Davies just wasn't very good. He told everybody at school that I was in Star Wars. And I think for years I was carrying on my flute, which is in one of those cylindrical Haynes cases. And they thought it was a lightsaber for a while. I didn't tell them otherwise because, you know, the kids. But, you know, that's the great thing. But I do a lot of teaching. I mean, I'm a visiting professor at the Guildhall, but I do teach around the world as well. We do chamber music, solo stuff. Has anybody ever played Candy Crush, Soda Saga? Yeah. You know, when you win a level, you get a C major scale on the flute. That is me. Yeah, that's probably the best thing I've ever done. We do a lot of movies. I've also written a book, which makes a great gift. It's about touring with the LSO to America, narrowly missing the Titanic, which was very interesting. I've interviewed conductors. We do lots of stuff online. There's a project I did in the summer called Where's Simon, which is about Simon Rattle, which we all recorded at home. I wrote the whole thing, which was great fun to do. You can have a look at that. And the possibilities are endless. You know, the skills that you have to do as a musician are so useful everywhere, in the orchestra and outside of the orchestra. And, you know, having a job in an orchestra, if COVID has shown us anything, is that, if you didn't already know, is that the stability in the music business is always a mirage. You're only one crisis away from unemployment. If you can cope with that, it's fine. You know, it's difficult, but it's great. But you know what? All the people I know, musicians, are interested in all sorts of things. So I know, especially when you're at your stage, you know, it's really easy to get like this. And I know, you know, Nina does millions of different things. And, you know, you should look to somebody like her who actually doesn't just play the flute every day, just do that. Well, maybe you do play it every day. I don't mean you don't play it ever, but you know what I mean. But you do other things. It makes interesting people, because who wants to listen to a boring musician playing something how they've been told how to play? Listen to other instruments, especially listen to singers. Singers will naturally do things that you make really complicated because you've got a lump of metal in your hand, you know. Immerse yourself in things outside your comfort zone. It's always good to do things like that. And, you know, I have to say, people often say, who's your favorite composer? Who's your favorite conductor? What was your favorite concert? And actually, some of the best things I've done, in fact, some of the most rewarding things I've done have been the visits we make to Great Ormond Street Hospital. It's a children's hospital. My daughter was in there a few years ago for a couple of weeks, and it's an amazing place. And it's just for kids. But I went into a room with another musician, and there was a girl who was very seriously ill, who was hiding in the corner because she didn't want us to make a noise because we had loud instruments. And it took about 20 minutes to even open the flute case. And, you know, just doing things like, you know, when you get your head joint out and put the finger in the end to make a silly noise, and, you know, there's a little smile there on that little girl's face. You think, oh, okay. And then she does it, and, you know, it goes on. Anyway, by the end of the hour-and-a-half session, she was banging a drum kit, and the parents were in tears. I think we probably were too. And, you know, all those years of training, it's very easy to think, but I'm in the LSO, I should be playing Daphnis and Chloe every week. And in actual fact, I've got more out of doing things like that. We work in the East London boroughs. London's a funny place because, you know, where I work in the City of London, it's incredibly rich. I mean, I couldn't afford to live anywhere near there. But you only need to move about half a mile down the road, and there's a lot of really poor areas. And the East London boroughs are like that. Which is why in 2012, when they built the Olympic Stadium there for the London 2012 Olympics, when Britain was a cool place to be, not like the septic isle it is now, we did some workshops with some kids from the East London boroughs. And the idea was that at the end that we would play at the Olympics opening ceremony. Now, some of you will have seen us, we did that thing with Mr. Bean a few years back. That was us. But there was a bit right at the beginning where we played Elgar's Nimrod from the Enigma Variations, which is a very important, it's the same kind of importance as probably Barber's Adagio for Strings has in America over here. And we had to play it with half the LSO and half of these kids, and we all had to wear evening dress and Converse boots. I don't know why, but that was the thing. And we had to play it in this thing. And we had earpieces on, and they said, okay, everybody, we're going to start in 10, 9, 8. Remember, there's 52 billion people, or 6 billion people, I can't remember how. It was a lot of billions anyway, are watching. And we played this, and it was really moving. we had to then sit there for 5 minutes while the nurses with the NHS beds came running on, and then we had to pick up our chairs and go off. And we went over there, and the little boy next to me, who lived in a tower block in East London, turned to me and he said, "I think this is the best day of my life." And I said, "You know what? I think it's probably the best day of my life too." And the amazing thing is that he was from a background that didn't listen to classical music, didn't do classical music. He got given a flute to play, and he's now studying at the Royal Academy of Music to be a professional player. And he's a very good player as well. And it was all because of that one day. That one day actually changed his life. So, you know what? I think I've certainly taken it for granted what I do. And the pandemic has shown me that you simply cannot do that. It's taken for granted music as well. I mean, I can't tell you the last time I listened to a concert live, because, well, not a classical concert, because I'm doing them all the time. I mean, I've worked 45 days without a day off. It's really hard work. It's great, but it's really tough, and there's a lot of repertoire. And in the pandemic, in the first lockdown, I think we're on the third one now, my family, some of my kids are grown up, but we were here at home, and I found myself with a free afternoon and everybody else was doing something, which, when you're locked down with people, it's quite nice, like, oh, phew, I don't have to talk to anybody. And they were showing on YouTube the final concert of Claudio Abbado conducting the Lucerne Festival Orchestra doing Mahler's Ninth Symphony. It was the last concert he did before he died, and everybody said it's a really great concert, you should watch it. And I thought, oh, right. So I turned it up, had it on TV, grabbed a beer, sat there, and it's the first time I've sat and concentrated on a piece of music like that for a very long time, where I've not been a participant. And as I said, I take music for granted, I think, probably, like I think we probably all do. And I watched this, and it was totally overwhelming. I mean, the playing was sensational. The interpretation was amazing. And I just thought, I didn't get my flute out at the beginning of the pandemic for about 8 weeks. I just put it in the box. I didn't want to play at all. It was so depressing. I just thought, I don't want to do this. And I did watch that concert. It was weeks and weeks and weeks later, and it all came back. So, I think it's okay to take a break for a start. Otherwise, you'll be a very dull person. There are all sorts of things you could do, but just don't take it for granted. And remember, that one concert where you're having a really bad day, your car broke down, the train was late, you got there, you played a wrong note, you sat down, you had to play. There might be one person there in that concert that's never heard the piece you're playing before, and it might change their life. And what an amazing thing to do for a job, really. So I've talked for a whole hour. And I'm sure that some of you will have questions, even if it's like, how much longer are you going to talk for? But if you do have any questions, I'm about anything, I'm more than happy. I'll give you an honest answer, hopefully.
Do you guys want to click the raising hand thing, or actually shake your hands? What should we do? We can get an order going too if there are questions. Raise your hand if you do have a question. Either the clicky thing or your actual hand. Anybody yet? I know that I have a question.
Ashley has a question.
Who? Oh, you have a question? Who has a question?
Ashley.
Ashley. Anybody else so far? Okay, so we'll
Ethan
do
as well.
Who? Ethan. Okay, so we'll do Ashley, Ethan, and then maybe I'll jump in with a question. Okay, Ashley.
What was your favorite Harry Potter movie soundtrack to play on?
Well, I didn't play on all of them. So definitely the ones I got paid for. But actually, it's funny because when you do record the movies, you see what's going on the screen as well. But you don't record it in order. So you don't just start at the beginning of the film and then go to the end. So quite often, when you go to see the movie, you're like, I didn't realize it was like this. And then people come alive again and stuff. And I do remember I can't remember what they were called, the last ones, but not the very last one, but the one before. When you see it and you're recording this music, you don't get the dialogue. So you've got no idea what's being said. And you have to sign all these things to say, you mustn't tell anybody what you're doing. Like, okay. And I just remember that in that movie, we were playing all this music and it was kind of all like, and there were people standing around in the woods. And I assumed they were talking, and I thought, this looks so boring. I have to say, that was quite boring. I like the last one was really good because we got to finish the whole cycle and it was just really exciting. And there was some really great music in that, actually. I mean, it's funny, you know, it's quite fun doing the movies for a bit, but they're quite, after a while they get boring. I mean, I was obsessed with Star Wars, and there was this one moment where I don't know if you've seen it, but where they turn Anakin Skywalker into Darth Vader, and that was the film that joined up the old films and the new films. So we, apart from the opening title music, all the music was definitely Star Wars, but it was all new melodies and stuff. So it wasn't like, you know, but that moment in the film, and we did record a lot of that in chronological order, suddenly for the very first time, he just came up and John was conducting, and he doesn't use a click track. So you do these 8-minute cues. I don't know how he does it. It's amazing. But you would go, and then it was just silence, and he'd be like going, and then Darth Vader comes on the screen, and he just went, bam, 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 bam. And everybody in the orchestra was kind of like, ooh. It was really cool. And then we got to do all of them. In fact, I don't know if you can see it. I don't know how big I am on your monitors, but that piece of music up there, that's from Revenge of the Sith. And it's the final credits. It's 28 pages long. And I got to the end of the films because, as I said, I thought it was the last one. Thought this will be cool, and so I took the music and thought, I'll put it in my bag, nobody will mind. And then I thought, but the trouble is, it's not handwritten or anything, it's just like printed out on Sibelius or something, so anybody could do that. So I got it out of my bag and I walked up to John Williams and I said, oh, hi John. He said, hi Gareth. I said, would you mind signing this for me? And he said, you want me to sign my music for you? I said, yeah. So I just asked John Williams to sign the music I've literally just stolen from him. And he went, sure. So he signed it. Dear Gareth, thank you for your great playing. Best wishes, John Williams. And George Lucas signed it as well. So that's like one of the coolest things I have. And it's got all the melodies in. That's not Harry Potter, is it? But it's a very sad moment when Dobby dies, and it's a very nice flute solo. But the thing is, the number of times you go to schools and people say, oh, you did Harry Potter? Yes, yes. Could you play that bit? And I'm like, no. I can't remember it. I mean, apart from the fact I haven't watched them obsessively because I'm a grown-up, I actually, when you turn up for a film session, you don't get the music in advance. Often it's locked in a safe. Alexander Desplat, when he was writing the Harry Potter movies, he was giving it on VHS cassettes. I don't even know if you know what they are, because they're much harder to copy because it's not on digital. And Warner Brothers installed a safe in his house. And even when he went out to go to the bathroom, he had to put the videotapes inside the safe because they were so worried about these films being leaked. So when I've played things in movies, I've usually only played them twice or 3 times. You play them through Sight Read It, then they change a few things, then you play another one, and then they'll say, yeah, that's good, let's do a safety, and that's it. So I can never remember anything we played, apart from Candy Crush, because that was a C major scale, which is the one I can do.
I love the synchronicity of your, you know, as a kid loving Star Wars, and then just the sort of the full cycle of now having the score behind you with the signature. And I love when life does that, and I think life does that for all of us. And
it does.
The key is to like believe in it and look for those moments and celebrate them and keep remembering them, because that's what makes it so rich and keeps us motivated during the times when that perfection isn't happening. But of course, it is all perfect in its own way. But I love that aspect of the story. So Ethan, you have a question?
Yeah, so I was just going to ask, what is the typical schedule like as an orchestral musician, like between rehearsals and performances?
Well, I mean, it depends where you are and what orchestra you're in. If you're in the LSO, it's like a worst case scenario. So pre-pandemic, I can tell you, I mean, for a start, there's no average week, but let's pretend there is. And on a Monday, we'd have rehearsals from 10 in the morning till 6 at night, on some new repertoire. Then we do the same on Tuesday. And then on the Wednesday, we might have one rehearsal. It depends what the program is, but it's normally you get 4 rehearsals. And then we might also have a kids concert in the morning on one of those rehearsal days, and maybe some sessions for recordings for all sorts of things. Then you do rehearsal on the concert day on the Thursday in the morning, and then a concert in the evening, quite often doing education workshops in the afternoon, so doing coaching sessions at the Guildhall or the Royal College. And then it will start again on Friday morning after the concert, 10 o'clock. It's the next programme. Rehearse Friday, Saturday, then 10 o'clock till 1 o'clock on Sunday, 7 o'clock concert on Sunday. Different programme. And then on Monday, it starts again, and then we might go on tour. So put it this way, it's a 7-day-a-week job. And we do, we go on tour, well, until recently, this last year that's just sort of happened, we should have done 70 concerts in the Barbican, our base in London, and 99 concerts around the world. So that's a lot of concerts, and most of them are different programs. So it's tough. But other orchestras aren't that bad. So my advice is don't apply for the job in the LSO, I guess. But it's great fun. If you didn't love doing it, you would say this is insane. Why am I doing this? It's madness, really. But you can take some things off. So I don't work every, obviously you can't do that all the time because you'd be ill, but it does happen.
Ethan's question, and I also wanted to ask this, reminds me, so Peter Lloyd used to always say, practice now, because if you ever end up like in the London Symphony, you'll never practice again.
Completely true.
Now is the only time you'll ever get to practice. And he would tell stories of how, he would be running from one orchestra to the next, to a session with to do a movie thing, just like what you just described. And so my question for you is, like, in terms of the cliche phrase work-life balance, and also in terms of like being centered as an artist and a musician, like where do you find your recharge?
Well, I think Peter's advice is true. I mean, it always sounds a bit like sort of, macho posturing, but it's just the way it is in this country. It's just really, we have fewer rehearsals than anyone else. And you're absolutely right, Nina. When you're at college, you have time to practice. Do it now. All your practice will be worthwhile, always. That doesn't mean you should practice like 12 hours a day. That's stupid as well. But one thing I do now, as you say, because I work long hours, if I dropped you all. If I got home, my kids are older now, but if I used to get home and then think, right, I better do my daily exercises now, and then I've got to do my tone production, and then I've got to do my articulation exercise, I'd have got divorced a long time ago. So what you do is you get really good at details practice. And in actual fact, it's something I do with my students, because I could probably come up with a really cool buzzword way of saying it, but it's just looking at what you have to practice and doing that. I was used to, when I was a kid, I used to love playing music. So when I was learning a new piece, I'd get it out, put it on the stand, start at the beginning and play it all the way through and go, yeah, that's good. And then the next day I'd do the same thing, maybe I'd do it twice. And every single time I'd make the same mistakes in the same place and essentially learn those mistakes. And, where I've been rude about excerpts, but where they are useful is that it's actually really, it's, if you're learning something like, let's take Daphnis, for example, the solo's difficult. It's not really difficult, but it's tricky, isn't it? You want to make sure it's under your fingers. There's people often spend a long time on the stuff because that's awkward, and lots of people don't look at the last section, and the last section is the bit I find the hardest. That's really hard, and people don't practice it. I practice those bits and I play it and I think, okay, I can play it, except for that bit. Why can't I play that bit? And I'll play that little bit and realize, oh, it's where it just turns around. It's got a gnarly little thing on the G sharp. I think it's that bit. So I'll just look at that bit, and it might be 4 semiquavers, and I'll practice that, and then I can play the whole phrase. So I've got very good at pinpointing what's wrong, which has helped us teaching, but it's helped me as well, because otherwise there's just not enough hours in the day. I mean, what I do, I mean, what to have a balance. I mean, I read a lot. I write. I write. I've written documentaries for the radio, and I've written a book. I write magazine articles. I like writing, as you can see. I've always got something to say. I like writing. I write stories, like creative writing as well, not under my name. And I do that, which I really enjoy, because actually when we play music, you're telling a story. It's about structure, and it's the same with writing. I find it's exactly the same, actually, in my head, about having to structure something. And the rest of the time, what do? I like running. I love running. It keeps me sane. I'm very lucky. I live outside London. I live in Surrey, which is the greenest county in England. And I go trail running around here, which I love. Oh, and if I want to go faster, I go on my motorbike. So, which is why.
What's your name as a writer?
I'm not telling you that. J.K. Rowling. You may have heard of me.
Oh, you're J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it? Surprise. No, you would. I've not done anything that you would have heard of. It's just, it's just my own thing, and it's nothing to do with music, which is it's nice to have something that's nothing to do with music, because I've tried to work really hard not to be totally defined by being Gareth Davies, principal flute at the London Symphony Orchestra, which of course is who I am, but that's not all I am. And actually my family is really important to me. You know, I have 3 children. I went to school with my wife. We've been together since we were 13. And I live in my hometown, which is 30 miles outside London. And we have friends here who don't have anything to do with music. And my wife isn't a musician. She was a midwife. And so, she still thinks I'm a genius, and nobody's told her otherwise. So we'll just keep it like that.
Yeah, that's great. Wow, that's inspiring. Okay, any one last question for 2 more minutes or something from anybody?
I've answered every single question in the whole world. Wow. Not many people can do that in an hour.
That was just so inspiring and wonderful. Thank you so much. And what a gift to be able to sit here in front of our computers and see each other and meet someone from across the seas and have just, so much great information and perspective, and put your stories to your name and your face and your legacy. So thank you.
It's been a pleasure speaking to you. It is. I mean, it has to be said, this is one of the positive things about what's going on in the world at the moment. I've been to places I'd really quite like to go to in real life as well. But it's actually really nice, and you just have to keep going, stay safe. And
there are a lot of silver linings to the pandemic, and I liked your little story about putting your flute away for a while. I also did that, and it's time to maybe tone some things down. And a lot of people have entered a really exciting creative phase of their life, and more respite and more perspective and more work around the hearth and being with families. And so there have been a lot of really fabulous aspects to it.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you so much again. And thank you from the WV Flute Studio, and for everybody who's joined. And if you're ever free at this time, Gareth, check out, we have Lorna McGee coming to talk to us. Yeah,
she
Lorna.
came to my wedding.
Oh, she did?
Yeah, she got stung by a wasp.
You know, she only lives an hour from here. We're quite good friends, Lorna and I. So Pittsburgh is only an hour from where Morgantown is.
Oh, right. Yeah, well, I've known Lorna since we were kids, so it's a small world. Will you send her my love when you speak to her?
I will. I will. Okay,
right.
thank you.
Lovely to see you all. You take care. See
Bye.
ya.
Thank
Bye.
you.